What if I told you that the people who speak the least often leave the deepest impression? Think about it. The teacher who pauses and lets the silence hang before saying just one line that cuts straight to the heart. The leader who doesn't shout to prove their authority but commands respect with their calm stillness. Or even the friend who simply listens, really listens, and somehow makes you feel more understood than 1,000 words ever could. Silence is strange like that. It unsettles us. It makes us wonder. It makes us lean in closer. And here's the secret most people miss. In a world overflowing with noise, silence isn't weakness, it's power. Why is it that those who speak less often mean so much more? We live in a world that never seems to stop talking. Scroll through your phone and you'll find endless posts, opinions, arguments, and noise. Step outside and it's the same story. Cars honking, people shouting over each other, advertisements begging for attention. It almost feels like the louder someone is, the more important they think they are. But here's the paradox. The ones who often hold the most weight in a conversation are not the loudest, but the quietest. Silence cuts through the noise because it forces people to pay attention in a different way. Think about the last time you were in a crowded room and someone suddenly fell silent. Didn't everyone notice? Even if no one said it out loud, the energy in the room shifted. Words are cheap when they're thrown around carelessly, but silence is rare, and what is rare always carries value. When someone chooses not to fill every gap with chatter, their words, when they finally do speak, carry a gravity that lingers. This is why silence feels almost magnetic. People lean in when someone doesn't rush to answer right away. They wonder what's being thought, what's being felt. The pause itself builds anticipation, and anticipation has power. Silence makes people uncomfortable, but it also makes them curious. In a world obsessed with constant talking, those who master silence stand out without even trying. They command respect not by competing in the noise, but by stepping out of it. And that raises a deeper question. If silence can be so powerful, why do most of us avoid it like the plague? Why do we treat quiet as empty, when in reality it might be the fullest thing of all? History is full of moments where silence spoke louder than any speech ever could. Think of Jesus standing before Pilate. He didn't defend himself with a flood of words. His quietness carried a weight that no argument could match. It unsettled those who heard it, because silence forces people to face themselves. Or look at the Buddha, who often answered deep questions not with endless explanations, but with stillness, teaching that wisdom doesn't always need words. Even in more modern times, leaders like Abraham Lincoln understood the power of pauses. During his speeches, he would stop and let silence hang in the air, making his listeners lean in, waiting for the next line. Those pauses weren't empty. They made his words echo in the minds of the audience long after he had spoken them. Winston Churchill did the same during the darkest days of World War II. His ability to pause, to let a silence stretch before delivering a few carefully chosen words, gave those words the weight of stone. Silence has always been used as a kind of weapon, not to wound, but to command attention. Mahatma Gandhi practiced long days of silence, showing that restraint could carry more strength than endless noise. Nelson Mandela, after years of imprisonment, often spoke sparingly, but when he did, his words carried a force that only silence could prepare. These examples remind us that silence is not the absence of communication. It's a different language altogether. A language of presence, patience, and control. The men and women who shaped history didn't always win people over with arguments. Sometimes it was their silence that made them unforgettable. Science actually backs up what history has shown us. Silence changes the way people perceive you. Psychologists have studied something called wait time in conversations, the pause between when one person finishes speaking and the other responds. Most people rush to fill that gap as quickly as possible. But when someone pauses, even just a few seconds, it completely shifts the dynamic. Listeners assume the person is thinking more deeply. Their eventual words feel more considered, more intelligent, and more trustworthy. In fact, research in communication shows that people who speak less often in group settings are often rated as more competent by their peers. It's not that they know more, but that their silence gives the impression that they are weighing things carefully. The mind naturally assigns value to what isn't freely given. When words are scarce, people treat them as precious. There's also a neurological effect. When silence falls in a conversation, our brains work harder to interpret meaning. That's why we tend to lean in, watch body language more closely, and read between the lines. Silence activates curiosity. It makes others wonder what you're thinking, what you're holding back. And that wondering gives you power without even speaking. On the flip side, constant talking can dilute your influence. The more you explain, the less weight your words carry. It's like watering down a strong cup of coffee until it's barely recognizable. But when you hold back, when you choose silence in a moment where everyone else is rushing to fill the air, you stand out. You're not just another voice in the crowd, you become the voice people are waiting for. I once knew a man who almost never spoke in meetings. Everyone else would rush in with ideas, interruptions, back and forth debates, but he would just sit there quietly, listening. At first, people assumed he didn't have much to contribute. But then, when the noise finally died down, he would clear his throat and share a single thought. And almost every time, that thought was the one that stuck, the one that changed the direction of the discussion. People began waiting for him to speak, because his silence had trained them to pay attention the moment he did. This same effect plays out in everyday life. Think of an argument with someone close to you. The temptation is always to fire back instantly, to defend yourself, to win the point. But if you resist that urge, if you sit in silence and let the other person pour everything out, you often find that the tension dissolves. They begin to hear their own words more clearly, sometimes realizing they're being unfair without you saying a thing. Your silence does the work that your words never could. In classrooms, teachers who pause instead of rushing to answer their own questions give students space to think. That pause feels uncomfortable at first, but it forces deeper engagement. Students dig a little further, try a little harder, and the learning sticks. And in friendships, silence can be the most comforting gift. Sometimes a friend doesn't need advice or explanations. They just need someone to sit beside them and share the quiet. No speech could heal them as much as that presence. Silence has this strange ability to fill spaces that words leave empty. It's not about having nothing to say. It's about saying more by holding back. Here's the strange part. Even though silence is so powerful, most of us are afraid of it. We treat quiet moments like awkward gaps that need to be filled as quickly as possible. Think about how people react when a conversation stalls. Someone cracks a joke, changes the subject, or starts rambling just to make the air feel less heavy. We've been trained to see silence as uncomfortable, even embarrassing, when in truth, it's neutral. It only feels awkward because we've learned to fear it. Social media makes this worse. Every second, people are posting, commenting, liking, and sharing. The pace is relentless, and it teaches us that if we're not constantly speaking or producing, we're irrelevant. We scroll through feeds where silence doesn't exist, and slowly we forget how to handle it in real life. We fill every quiet moment with music, podcasts, or chatter just so we won't have to face stillness. Part of the fear comes from what silence exposes. When everything goes quiet, you start hearing your own thoughts more clearly, and not all of them are easy to sit with. Silence shines a light on insecurities, doubts, and emotions we've been ignoring. No wonder so many people run from it. But here's the real challenge. By avoiding silence, we also avoid growth. We lose the chance to listen deeply, to reflect, to understand others and ourselves. We trade the richness of presence for the shallow comfort of noise. The irony is that the very thing we avoid is what could give us the strength we're chasing. So, the question is, what changes when we stop running from silence and start embracing it? When you choose silence instead of running from it, the world around you begins to shift. At first it feels strange, like you're stepping out of a busy crowd and standing still while everyone else rushes by. But soon you notice something different. People respond to you in ways they didn't before. In conversations, your pauses make others slow down too. Your restraint shows confidence, as if you don't need to fight for space because you already own it. In relationships, silence becomes a tool of connection. When you listen without rushing to reply, people feel valued. They sense that you're not just waiting for your turn to talk, you're actually hearing them. That kind of presence builds trust faster than 1,000 words. Leaders who understand this often draw people in without raising their voices. They command a room not by overpowering it, but by grounding it in stillness. Silence also strengthens you personally. It teaches patience because holding back isn't always easy. It teaches discipline because you resist the urge to fill every gap. And it gives you control because you're not reacting on impulse, you're choosing your response. In this way, silence isn't avoidance, it's intention. It's not about having nothing to say. It's about realizing you don't need to say everything. Imagine an argument where instead of firing back, you pause and let silence settle. Suddenly, the power shifts. You're no longer dragged into a shouting match, you're the calm center. Or think of a decision where you sit quietly, weigh your thoughts, and resist pressure to rush. That quiet space allows wisdom to surface. Choosing silence doesn't make you smaller, it makes you steady. It shows that you're not controlled by noise, you're in control of yourself. Silence has always been more than just a social skill. It's a doorway to wisdom. In the Bible, the verse, "Be still and know that I am God," points to something deeper than quietness. It's about recognizing that in silence, truth becomes clear. When we stop talking, stop filling the air with our own noise, we make room for something greater to speak to us. Prayer isn't only words. Often, it's sitting silently in God's presence, letting peace settle where worry once lived. The Stoics also understood this. They believed restraint in speech was a sign of strength. Marcus Aurelius wrote thoughts only for himself, never to impress others. His silence wasn't emptiness, it was focus. He knew that wisdom grows in quiet reflection, not endless chatter. Epictetus reminded his students to listen more than they spoke, to let silence be their teacher. There's something universal about this truth. Across faiths and philosophies, silence is described as sacred, the soil where understanding takes root. It's in stillness that people hear the whispers of conscience, feel the pull of purpose, and gain clarity about what really matters. Think about how often breakthroughs come not in the middle of noise, but in a quiet walk, a moment alone, or a pause after prayer. Silence is where the soul breathes. It's where the mind unclutters, where the heart finally has room to be heard. In that space, wisdom isn't something you chase. It's something that finds you. Choosing silence isn't just about appearing wise to others. It's about becoming wise within yourself. Conflict is one of the places where silence shows its sharpest edge. Most people think the louder voice wins an argument, but often the opposite is true. Imagine a heated debate where one person keeps raising their voice, piling on words, trying to dominate. Then the other person simply stops speaking. The quiet becomes uncomfortable, and suddenly the one shouting begins to look smaller, less in control. Silence turns the spotlight back on them, exposing the weakness in their noise. Parents sometimes do this without realizing. A child throws a tantrum, expecting a reaction. Instead of yelling back, the parent stays calm and quiet. That silence has more authority than shouting ever could. The child eventually runs out of energy, and the parent's steady presence speaks volumes. "I'm not shaken. I'm not controlled by your noise." Leaders in tense situations often rely on this same principle. In a negotiation, silence can be a tactic more powerful than any demand. When you resist the urge to fill the space, the other side feels pressure to speak, to reveal more than they intended. The silence tilts the balance without a single word spoken. Even in personal arguments, silence can save relationships. Instead of feeding fire with fire, choosing quiet gives space for emotions to cool. It shows restraint, but it also shows respect. You're saying, "I don't need to fight you to prove my point. My silence will hold it." Conflict makes people believe they must outshout the other side to win. But in reality, silence often delivers the final word. It shifts the ground beneath the conversation, making people realize that sometimes the strongest response is no response at all. Silence also works wonders in relationships, maybe even more than in arguments. So many people believe that love and friendship are built on constant talking, constant sharing of thoughts. But often, it's the quiet moments that reveal the deepest bonds. Think about sitting with someone you trust completely. You don't feel the need to fill every second with chatter. The silence itself feels safe, almost like its own language. That's when you know the relationship is real, when silence is comfortable, not awkward. Listening plays a huge role in this. Most of us aren't really listening when others talk. We're just waiting for our turn to speak. But when you choose silence, when you lean in and actually hear the words, the pauses, the emotions, people feel it. They can tell when you're not just nodding along but truly paying attention. That kind of listening builds trust because it shows that their words matter. In marriages, this can make all the difference. A spouse who listens silently without interrupting often learns more than one who rushes to fix everything with advice. Sometimes people don't need solutions. They need space to be heard. Silence gives them that space. In friendships too, quiet presence often means more than speeches. Sitting side by side, walking together without talking, or simply being still in each other's company can create memories stronger than words. Mentorships thrive on this same principle. The best mentors don't always give endless lectures. They ask questions, then stay quiet long enough for the answers to surface. Silence gives room for growth. It nudges people to think for themselves, to find clarity instead of being spoon-fed. When silence is used with care, it becomes a sign of love, respect, and understanding. Words may be forgotten, but the feeling of being truly heard, or simply being held in silence, lasts. Silence is also the secret fuel behind creativity and problem-solving. Our best ideas rarely come in the middle of chaos. They arrive in the quiet moments when the noise finally fades. Think about it. How many times have you wrestled with a problem, talked it through endlessly, only to have the solution appear when you're lying in bed at night, taking a shower, or walking alone without distractions? Silence gives the mind space to wander, and in that wandering, connections are made that constant noise drowns out. Many of history's greatest thinkers understood this. Nikola Tesla spent long hours in silence, visualizing his inventions in his head before ever building them. Beethoven would retreat into solitude, where silence helped him hear music no one else could imagine. Writers, artists, scientists, all of them relied on quiet spaces where inspiration could break through. It wasn't the noise of the crowd that sparked their brilliance, but the silence away from it. Modern research backs this up too. Studies on deep work show that when we cut out distractions and embrace quiet, our brains enter a state of focus that produces more original, valuable work. Silence lowers stress, slows racing thoughts, and frees up mental energy that's usually wasted on reacting to noise. That's why people often describe moments of clarity as a quiet mind. Even in everyday life, silence can unlock creativity. Maybe you're stuck on a problem at work, or struggling with a personal decision. Taking 10 minutes to sit in silence, no phone, no music, no conversation, can give your mind the reset it needs to find an answer. It's almost like silence clears the cluttered desk of your thoughts, leaving space for new ideas to lay themselves down. Without it, you're just shuffling papers in the noise. Silence reaches its peak power in the moments where everything is at stake. Think of a courtroom where all eyes are on the judge. The gavel hasn't dropped yet, and the silence in the room is so heavy you could hear a pin fall. That silence doesn't mean nothing is happening, it means everything is happening. Tension, anticipation, and meaning all gather in that quiet. When the judge finally speaks, the words land with the weight of that silence behind them. Or imagine a teacher facing a restless classroom. Instead of shouting to regain control, she simply stands at the front and waits. Slowly, the chatter dies down. One by one, students notice the silence, and within moments, the entire room settles. Her power didn't come from raising her voice, but from refusing to compete with the noise. The silence itself became her authority. Even in military standoffs or tense negotiations, silence is often the strongest move. A leader who holds his ground without a word shows more control than one who reacts instantly. That stillness sends a message. I am not afraid. I am not rushing. I will move when I choose. And that confidence unsettles opponents more than aggression ever could. The truth is, silence is never just emptiness. It's choice. It's control. It's the mark of someone who doesn't need to prove themselves with constant words because they already know their presence is enough. That's why silence can feel louder than shouting, heavier than speeches, and more memorable than endless explanations. In the climax of life's key moments, silence doesn't shrink your influence. It multiplies it. It becomes the force that makes people lean in, listen closely, and never forget. If silence holds so much power, the question is how to bring it into daily life. The good news is, it doesn't take grand gestures. It starts with simple habits, little choices that shift the way you move through the world. One of the most practical is to pause before responding. Instead of rushing to answer a question or defend a point, let a few seconds of silence sit. At first it feels uncomfortable, but soon you'll notice that people listen more closely when you finally speak. That pause makes your words sharper, clearer, and harder to ignore. Another practice is taking silent walks. Leave the headphones at home, skip the constant stream of noise, and walk without filling the air. Let your thoughts wander. Notice the world around you. Hear the rhythm of your own footsteps. These small pockets of silence create space for reflection and reset your mind in ways constant stimulation never can. You can also carve out no-talk zones in your day. Maybe it's 10 minutes of quiet after waking up or before bed. Maybe it's driving without the radio or eating one meal in silence. These small windows of quiet help you become comfortable with stillness, so it stops feeling awkward and starts feeling natural. Prayer and meditation are also ways to embrace silence, not just as an absence of words, but as a presence of peace. Sitting quietly with God or simply breathing without distraction trains you to find calm within. Over time, silence stops being something you fear and becomes something you look forward to, a tool you carry into conversations, conflicts, and decisions. The more you practice silence, the less you'll be ruled by impulse or noise. Instead, you'll find yourself steady, focused, and in control. Silence isn't about shutting the world out. It's about tuning in more deeply to what really matters. A lot of people misunderstand silence, and that's why they avoid it. They think being quiet means being shy, weak, or unsure of themselves. But there's a huge difference between silence born from fear and silence chosen out of strength. Shyness keeps you quiet because you're worried about what others will think. Wisdom keeps you quiet because you know not everything needs to be said. One is insecurity, the other is control. Some people confuse silence with disengagement, as if not speaking means you don't care. But often, it's the opposite. When you listen silently, you're more engaged than anyone else in the room. You're taking in details others are missing. You're watching body language, tone, and meaning beneath the words. That's not apathy, it's awareness. Silence is also not about avoidance. Avoidance runs away from problems and refuses to face them. Silence faces the problem but doesn't rush into noise. It holds the tension, waits for clarity, and responds when the time is right. That's strength, not weakness. The truth is, silence is a skill. It takes effort to resist the urge to speak just to fill space. It takes discipline to hold your tongue when pride wants to jump in. And it takes wisdom to know when silence is the right choice and when words are needed. Mastering that balance is what separates those who are merely quiet from those who are truly powerful. So instead of seeing silence as something empty or awkward, it's time to reframe it. Silence isn't a lack of expression, it's a form of expression. It's a statement that says, I don't need to prove myself with noise. My presence, my attention, and my patience are enough. Looking back, the thread is clear. We live in a noisy world where words spill out everywhere, yet the ones who speak less often end up leaving the deepest mark. History shows it, science explains it, and personal experience confirms it. From leaders who let silence command a room, to friends who comfort us without saying a thing, the quiet moments carry the weight words can't. Silence is more than the absence of sound. It's a presence that changes the space around it. When we run from silence, we trade away our chance to grow. We fill every gap with chatter and distraction, never realizing that wisdom often waits in the pause. But when we embrace silence, we discover strength, clarity, and control. We find a new way to handle conflict, to build trust in relationships, to spark creativity, and to deepen our faith. Silence, used with intention, turns ordinary interactions into unforgettable ones. Think about the people you admire most. Chances are they're not the ones who never stop talking. They're the ones who choose their words carefully, who let silence carry their meaning, who make you lean in because they're not afraid to hold back. That's not weakness, it's influence. That's not emptiness, it's depth. So maybe the question isn't, why is silence so uncomfortable? Maybe it's, why have we ignored its power for so long? Because the truth is simple. In a world addicted to noise, silence is the one voice that can't be ignored. It's the quiet power that makes what you do say and who you are mean so much more. Silence speaks volumes. If you want to discover more ways to use it as strength in your own life, watch the next video that's on your screen right now.